Welcome to another week in the books. Thank you so much for being here. I had a fairly busy reading week and got through 4 things, so we're gonna have a pretty full video today, so we might as well get to it. First thing is something I mentioned in last week's video as already having started, and that is the Fellowship of the Ring. And this, as I mentioned in that video, is a reread because I'm doing a Lord of the Rings book club, which is super exciting. So book club has already met. We read part 1 of the Fellowship of the Ring. And so once we met and discussed that, I was like, all right, gotta keep going, gotta finish the book and read part 2, that we won't be discussing for a while. But I managed to get through it in a very short time following book club, just because I was like, we're in this story. Let's go. Let's keep up with the plot. So if you're unfamiliar with the Lord of the Rings, the premise is that all of the characters live in a world called Middle-earth, and there is an evil ring that has to be destroyed. And the person who comes to be the ring bearer, the person who has that ring at the beginning of the story, is a creature named Frodo. He's a hobbit. And Frodo then is joined by a lovely cast of characters as he leaves his home. Doesn't start out thinking that he's gonna be doing anything more than getting the ring from his home in the Shire to Rivendell, which is a place where the elves live. And he's just bringing it there for safekeeping, or so he thinks. But of course, in all good adventures, sometimes it's the adventure that sneaks up on the main character that you're like, wow, we're in for more than we expected. Of course, this being a reread, I knew what was coming, but I thoroughly enjoyed it all the same. I think that Frodo makes for a really compelling main character, and seeing him interact with the other hobbits we get to know, specifically there's Sam, his gardener, Merry and Pippin, and then we see, of course, the iconic Gandalf, the wizard, who is just perhaps my favorite fictional character of all time. I might say that. I think I will say that. And Gandalf, of course, brings his own flair and fun to the story. And honestly, things are better when Gandalf is around. I feel that on such a risky quest and adventure, it's good to bring a wizard along and let him be your guide. But then, since this is the Fellowship of the Ring, we have more characters who are setting out on that adventure aside from just the hobbits and Gandalf. There's Aragorn, who is a man who is like the last of a long line of kings. So he is working through that part of his story of like reclaiming his throne in the right time and in the right season. And then there's Legolas, he is an elf, Gimli, the dwarf, and Boromir, who is another man. And adventure ensues for all of them. Some stuff that you're like, well, this is kind of fun, you know, they're on this quest, and then some stuff you're like, this is not fun. This is dangerous and daring and exciting. So that's the first book. Of course, in this Lord of the Rings universe, there's the Fellowship of the Ring, and then the next book will be the Two Towers, and then of course the Return of the King, and then of course Tolkien has all sorts of other things, writings out there about Middle-earth, but for book club we're just doing those 3. So having fun with it. If you haven't read it, I'd give it a shot if I were you. I mean, the movies of course are awesome too, so if you've seen the movies and you haven't read the books, you should read the books too, because there's a lot, of course, that you can only fit so much into a movie, and there's a lot more to love in the books. So definitely recommend these books. Next we have When You Reach Me, which is a middle grade book dealing with friendships and time travel. I wasn't sure what to expect from this book because I went in pretty blind. It's a book that my friend and I are talking about for our project together, so I was like, this is his recommendation. It's gonna be probably fun. And we like middle grade. It's always good when you find a middle grade that's just fun, and the characters are just so young and innocent and delightful. So I was like, okay, this one should be good. This should be fun. but I really didn't know what was going to be happening with time travel. I didn't think that was going to be a factor. So much of what I've been reading lately, that seems to be an element of it, time travel. So apparently that's just the reading season of my life that I'm in. But what we have here in When You Reach Me is a protagonist named Miranda. She is a 6th grader in the 70s, I want to say. And she lives with her mom in an apartment in New York, and she recently saw something happen to her friend, who up to that point was like her best friend. His name's Sal. She saw something happen to him, and it's like that event seems to be the starting point, she feels, to the deterioration of their friendship, and she doesn't know why, but Sal's like not hanging out with her anymore, ignoring her, they don't walk to and from school together anymore. And so that's sort of like the jump point of the story, is she's dealing with that, and from that and her trying to understand it, she begins to make other friends at school and gets to know more of her classmates, which is fun, of course. And there's the middle school drama of things, you know, where there's a character who right away, and through most of the story, Miranda's like, bad vibes, we don't like her, she's so snobby and stuck up. And then of course, as the story progresses, you get to know that character more, and it's that whole conversation lesson about like, everyone has stuff going on, everyone has a backstory. Just because at the start of the story this person is the snobby, maybe bully-ish character, doesn't mean that that is who they're going to be for the whole story. And then of course, like I mentioned, this time travel thing is going on, but it's just sort of happening in the periphery, because Miranda starts getting little messages from someone who says that they will be arriving at a certain point in time to save her friend. And she doesn't know what that means. She doesn't know really anything about that. It's just like, well, this is odd. This is just strange. And it's kind of like paralleled in conversations by her ongoing love of the book A Wrinkle in Time, which she's like always carrying with her, always rereading. There's a character named Marcus who she talks through some like time travel stuff in the story. And you're like, okay, so this Marcus character, he is really interested in the time travel stuff and the theory of time travel and physics and all this stuff. But you're like, what's going on? Like, is it actually time travel? Or is it someone playing a strange prank on her? What's gonna happen? And then of course, in the end, like the last quarter, you're like, oh, this is what's been going on. And I'm honestly still sorting through all of my thoughts about how the story played out and what the story was doing. But big takeaways are that I liked Miranda, and getting to see her flaws as a character, but also who she is as a friend, trying to be a better friend, who she was as a daughter, and just all of the dynamics between her and her mom. I thought it was good, especially for middle grade. I thought that it was exploring good things about friendship and people, and so as a story, it was solid. The third thing I've got for you is a nonfiction piece called Ordinary Time, and it is a collection of essays written by a woman who labels herself as a stayer, meaning that though she had all of these kind of dreams and aspirations about going off to a bigger city, pursuing her journalism career, because she went to school for journalism, really influenced by like the 90s rom-com vibes of meet cutes in New York City and being a young adult on an adventure, a fresh adventure, living your life. She is someone who moved back home after college and then lived there a couple of years, and now lives like 40 minutes up the road, owns a bookstore, lives there with her husband, you know, like making that her community. And so different essays kind of thinking about like the perception of home, or even about what does it mean that I stayed when other people left, and how do I keep like building community and making community my own when all my friends, you know, have gone elsewhere, or it's hard starting over with friendships in adult life. Also reflecting on what it has been to own a bookstore and that be a huge part of her life. All of these different things, from like family stuff to faith stuff, just across the board, a lot of different essays dabbling into each one of those things, giving really heartfelt but also humorous reflections. It's clear that the author is not taking herself too seriously. Like, she hasn't written this as sort of like a self-help of like, you're a stayer, well, I'm a stayer, let me tell you then what all this means about your life. It's more of just reflections, and they're written really beautifully that I think anyone, even if you're not a stayer, can relate to things and connect with them. Because like, I'm not a stayer. I grew up in central Minnesota and have not lived relatively or even remotely close to my hometown since my first summer home from college, which was a while ago. And now I'm, you know, over here in Germany, living, doing stuff over here. So I'm not a stayer, obviously, but her book is very human. There's a lot of human things in there and a lot of heartfelt things that I was like, oh, I get this, or this makes me think about maybe my relation to home and my life, the choices I've made that, you know, have resulted in me having to restart with community, or what it is to forge adult friendships or keep up with the long distance friendships from home. I think it's just very thoughtful. And honestly, this book got onto my radar because I follow the author on Instagram, as she keeps up with like bookish stuff in her bookstore. And this may sound silly, but her Instagram captions, anytime I'd read them, I'm like, this just sounds like it has more substance than anything I see on social media. And so when I heard that she was coming out with this book, I was like, I have to read that. And it lived up to those expectations of getting something just beautifully written and something that felt personable. It just came out this past April, so it's relatively new, but I definitely recommend this one, and I think it could be like an easy, light read that's not just fluff. So check this one out if you feel like this is something for you. Last up is The Stardust Grail, which is my latest buddy read with my pal, who I've mentioned a bunch of times in these videos because we've been doing buddy reads since the start of the year. But this is a futuristic sci-fi space heist situation. And the cover of my book even compared it to Indiana Jones, which is fun. So what we have here is a main character named Maya, who is a grad student at Princeton. So there's some normal stuff, you know, even though it's set in the future and you're like, wow, we're exploring space. There's some normal touchstones, of course. So Maya is a grad student at Princeton, and she has come to this grad program after living sort of a very different life up to that point. She, prior to grad school, was acquiring historical and culturally significant artifacts and returning them to the people they belong to. So she was a space pirate, essentially, but like in a good way, like Robin Hood. And she's put that all behind her. She's like, no more, that was dangerous. The last job did not go the way that I had planned, and me and my friend almost died, like that. No more of that. But of course, the adventure and another job finds her when her best friend, an alien named Uncle, who she used to do all that space robbing stuff with, contacts her. And Uncle's like, hey, do you remember that one artifact that we always dreamed and talked about, the Stardust Grail? Well, I think I have a new lead for it. And then something happens at the university with Maya that she's like, okay, we definitely have a new lead for the Grail. And so of course they have to set out and try to find it and give it one last go, because she's like, this artifact is worth it. And the reason it's so important to her is because Uncle, her alien species, is like going extinct because they can't have kids anymore, and they need the Grail to be able to have kids again. But at the same time, there's other people looking for the Grail because there's a bigger space issue happening where the way that space travel is done, it's done through these things called nodes, and nodes are starting to self-destruct essentially. And that is a bad thing because not only is it like, okay, we can't use that node anymore, but like what is in the vicinity of the node also is destroyed. So like Earth is at risk. And so these people are like, we need the Grail because we want to fix this problem. We think that it will fix it. So Maya finds herself kind of caught between those two things where it's like, these are two big problems. And I have that allegiance to Uncle, that's my best friend. But also I live in space and I know Earth and live on Earth now doing this program that's like, what do I do? So that's sort of the dilemma she faces. And of course there's that adventure of like, okay, but we gotta find the Grail. And it was a fun story. I think there were times where I was like, this isn't as like snappy of a pace or a plot as I thought it would be based on the description of the book. So I think that pacing could have been attended to better. But I think like Maya and Uncle were two very compelling characters, and then there were a couple other side characters that I were like, okay, you're fun. I see what you're adding to the mix. So I didn't love it just based on some like technical things of how the story came across and just that I thought sometimes it dragged a little, but the characters were fun. I was invested in seeing how the dilemmas would be solved as far as like what gets to happen with Uncle's species and the friendship between Maya and Uncle, and then with the people who were trying to save the universe as a whole, I guess is how you'd say that, if they would be problems or if they could be allies or what would even happen with their issue, how that would play out. So there were a lot of interesting pieces at play, and I think if you're someone who enjoys like stories in space, that this one could be a fun one for you, because again, it's that Indiana Jones type of thing where you're going off looking for a treasure, just having some adventure along the way. So would recommend it again if you like sci-fi and if you like stories in space. This one could be for you. So that was my week in books. It was a good week, as you can tell, but the thing that keeps dragging me down is the fact that friggin' War and Peace is still just out there plaguing me. So we're gonna see about making some progress on that this week. And then also I started last night a biography of a football player named Johnny Unitas. It's kind of random, but I love a good sports, either fiction or a memoir, biography. I'm into those things sometimes. So we will see how that one turns out. And if you have any recommendations for me, please pass them along as I'm figuring out what else to get into. And then I'll catch you next week, and I hope between now and then that you too have some good reads.